We just showed how to render a list of websites and be able to either edit a particular one or add a website using plus. Obviously, we didn't finish it up, but I think from where we have so far working with profiles, you should be able to reuse a lot of this code to complete the rest of those service functions, CRUD operations. What I'd like to skip now is to widgets, right? How you render widgets and render the editors for those widgets. I'm going to skip over pages entirely, right? But it's going to work exactly the same way that we've been doing the websites, right? So you can use the same ideas to work on pages, right? So the widgets are going to have a URL something like this, right? Where you're going to have a website and the ID of a particular website, then page that would show a list of pages for that particular website. Then a particular page, right? If you want to edit it, or if you want to be able to create a new page, or if you have a particular page, you can list the widgets, right? Widget. This would list all the widgets in that particular page, right? So this is what I want to focus on right now, right? So let me copy this URL pattern, right? And let's configure a navigation to that list of widgets, right? So I'm going to put here, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put here a to-do, complete website routes, and to do create page routes, right? And then here are the widget routes, okay? And the widget routes, I'm going to copy, it's going to look something like website ID, then page ID, right? And then widget. And that's a list of widgets, yes? And we're going to put them in where? In widget. This is going to be templates. This is going to be widget list, right? View and client. No controller just yet. Let's create a directory for those widgets. We do have, and let's create a directory for the templates. And let's move that template where it belongs and rename it the way we listed it here, right? Okay, let's rename that. Okay, so let's try that. That didn't work. Oh, there it is. Yes, we do. Okay, so this is I believe where we left the list of widgets a couple weeks ago. That we have the text edit and the heading of the HTML and whatnot. Yes, and this was all hard coded. So let's edit this so that this becomes dynamic and part of the single page application that we're building. Right. So let's remove the some of the wrapping HTML here, right? So that this is no longer a standalone HTML page. Instead, is inside of a inside of a larger framework, right? Infrastructure. So this is right now it's hard coded, and so instead of rendering it this way, what we'd like to be able to do is instead retrieve the widgets for this particular page, right? And then render those widgets dynamically, correct? So let's do that. First of all, we'll need a controller, right, to feed us that data, right? And so let's create a controller for this template. So let's do controllers, if I can spell, controllers, and I'm gonna create a controller here. JavaScript, and so this will be widget list dot controller dot client.js, right? And here we'll have an iffy that will load the module. What was it called? Web app maker, right? And declare a controller called widget list controller. Implement it in a function of the same name, right? Where should it retrieve the list of widgets? From a service, right? And now, which widgets? It should retrieve the widgets for this particular page, right? Right. So we need to parse that list, that URL from the parameter, and according to config, that parameter is called PID, page ID, right? So let's parse all these UID, widget ID, and PID ID. Let's parse them all from the route parameters. So route params, and let's parse all of them and put them already in the controller instance, right? So that we could, if we needed to render in the view, it's already there. So let's create an instance. Let's map the instance of the controller to a local view model, and let's tie the ID from the route params to a user ID in the controller. So route params dot UID, I believe it's called. We'll put also the website ID in the route params. Route params dot website ID, and VM dot page ID in the route params, from the route params dot page ID. Yes? Okay, so we have everything we need from the current state of the application, right? Right. So really, route params, it's really a kind of encodes everything we need for the state of the application, right? This route params is the state of the application, right? It's all we really need to reconstruct any page. Okay. All right. So we have that. Once we have those, we need to go fetch the widgets for that particular page. So presumably we would want something like a widget service that we can query it to retrieve the widgets for a particular page ID. So find widgets, right? Or find all widgets, presumably within the context of a page, right? So let's implement this service. We don't have that, so let's implement it right here. New JavaScript widget service. No, that's not the name, right? That's not correct. That's not the correct naming convention. Let's refactor that. So it's widget.service.client.js. There we go. All right, so this will be, oops, what happened? Ah! Here we go. So it's an iffy. And here we're going to say Angular dot module. And let's grab the web app maker namespace and declare a service using a factory pattern. So the factory pattern is part of a collection of many patterns, right? The idea is that you want to delegate the logic of instantiating something, right? Something that is not trivial to instantiate, right? Perhaps it's an instance of an object that depends on many other things, right? That has to be configured. Maybe needs to do some data access. Maybe read some configuration file. Maybe has to do a network connection. It's nothing trivial to instantiate this thing. And once it's instantiated, it's a very expensive object to instantiate, right? So you want to do it just once, perhaps at boot time, and then never again, right? And then you want to make it available as a single instance across the infrastructure, right? It's a very, very well-known design pattern that has worked well in large applications. So the dot factory is for implementing this kind of object, right? Where you're delegating the instantiation. It's not a trivial instantiation, so we're going to encode here all the logic for instantiating that. And then everyone who wants to use it, right, can then just name it by name, and magically it just instantiates and it becomes part of your, when you ask for it by name on demand. Right. So yeah, that's the intention of the factory pattern, and where the name factory comes from. So anyway, so let's create this Singleton instance. Singletons is also another design pattern where you want to have something that instantiated once and then never again, and used all over the place. So let's see. So widget service implemented in a constructor of the same name, and we're going to create an API. Return API. And in here we want to be able to find all widgets. So let's find all the widgets. So find all widgets. And somebody was asking me, what about, shouldn't these all be quoted? Right? And yes, in proper JSON, the attributes should all be quoted. The interpreters are smart enough to understand that this is a property, right, and that it should be quoted. And indeed, we'll see a little later on the server side, even if we don't use quotes like we should, the servers is smart enough that when it passes JSON back and forth, when it converts object instances into a string representation, it quotes everything correctly. Right? Even if we use the wrong single quotes, it uses correct double quotes. So yeah, so the left-hand side, these are property, the names. So these are all name-value pairs, right? These are tuples. So this is the name of the property, and then this is the value of the property. So this is these should always be double quoted. But sometimes you'll see me not quoting them, right? But again, because the interpreter is smart enough to understand this is a name, obviously is quoted. But properly it should be. Now on the right hand side, there's many different data types, right? This could be an object instance, this could be a number, a string, it could be a function, right? In this case we're using functions, but it could be anything. It could be an array, it could be another object, right? Nested objects. So this is a function that is implemented here, right? And it's being referenced from here, okay? So that means that whoever uses this object, they can use the bracket syntax, right? Quote, find all widgets, and that resolves to this function. That's the value, right? If you give it a name, it gives you the value. Or you can use the dot notation like we've been doing. Dot, find all widgets, right? And that's a syntactic sugar, right? That's just for convenience, right? Gives it an object-oriented feel, right? Even though it's not object-oriented. For find all widgets, and the parent is the page ID, okay? And this would return all widgets. So I believe in the assignment I gave you several widgets somewhere. There they are. And so we're going to store it here, var widgets. There they are. Right now, I'm just going to return all the widgets. I'm not going to filter, but you would filter normally. But just for time's sakes, I'm just going to return all the widgets. Right there, they are widgets. Okay. All right. Again, all this code is going to go away, right, when we move this to the server anyway. Okay, so find all widgets, returns them right here. So where are they being retrieved? Right there, right? There they are. Websites find all no, not website. Wait, not this one. Where's find all widgets? Widgets. Widget list. Oh, there it is, down here. There it is. All right, find all widgets, pass in the page ID, and returns all the widgets. Yes? Right. So back at the widget list template, where is that? Widget list template. Where are you? Does anybody see it? I thought we created it. Where is it? Widget. There it is. This one right there. Okay. So this is these are all the widgets down here, right? I'm just going to render here the object that's coming from the service, from the controller, and it's be model.widgets, right? Right, that's where we're putting it. vm.widgets, model.widgets. Yes? All right. All right, so what about the config? There's a config. We need to tie these two things together, right? The template, there's a template, is going to be tied to a widget list controller. Right, it's going to be referenced by model in the template. And finally, we need to load all these guys, right? We need to load the brand new JavaScript we just created. This is getting out of hand, right? So let's maybe provide some context here. So these are controllers. These are controllers. These are services. I see a lot of you are doing this. Nice. That's nice. Thank you. Services. And that's it, right? Okay, so let's load those controllers, that brand new controller script, source, widget, controllers, and then widget list controller. There we go. And the new service, script, source, services, widget service. Notice that we didn't bother to namespace these guys. See that? All the services are under just services. You see that? And unlike controllers. Like controllers, we did put them under controllers and templates and whatnot. And that's only because there are so many more controllers and templates than there are services, right? And typically, you'll only have a handful of entities that you're manipulating. In this case, our entities up to this point are websites, widgets, users, and pages. Those are all our entities, right? There's data models for those, right? But the templates and controllers will be more driven by how we want to split up the navigation of our page for the benefit of the user, to make it simple for the user, right? We want to split it up into 3, 4, 5 pages, right, so that the user is not overwhelmed, right? If this weren't a human being, we won't even bother with the user interface, right? Just the data is enough. You just pass data back and forth, right? In a JSON format, it's just good enough. But being humans and having a very low bandwidth, right? We split up things into different pages, and I think we have a pretty good input. We have a much higher bandwidth input as opposed to bandwidth output. Our output bandwidth is so slow, right? We have these we have these meat sticks that we type with. Or we speak with our language very, very slow, as opposed to we could consume a lot of data with our visual cortex. But anyway, so we split up the content into many controllers, many templates. Again, for the low bandwidth of humans. But the service, the data services are few, right? We just because we have just much fewer data. Yes? Okay. All right, so I think let's see if we reload this. There they are. Wow, worked at the first try. We have all the widgets listed here, and this is what we want to render, right? We want, instead of having this hard-coded widgets down below, we want to render this dynamically, right? So let's see how we would do this. So one thing we could do, and there's a couple ways that we could do it. Let's do it. Let's try this for now. We have a template here. We kind of have a template here that says, well, here is the heading, right? For how do you want to render heading, and it has a toolbar, and then the actual heading, right? This is the actual HTML that we're adding. Here we have another heading, but we didn't bother to put the toolbar, right? So we would need this toolbar also there, right? And then the actual heading. Same thing here. We have a toolbar, and an image. So it looks like there's a pattern here, right? There's a div. The first half is the toolbar, and then the next part is the actual HTML, right? And the HTML, the DOM, it depends on the type, right? If it's a heading, it's H, right? H1, H3, H2, H4, H5, whatever. If it's an image, we have IMG. If it's a raw HTML, it's whatever the raw HTML, it's there. If it's an iframe, we'll use the iframe, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's render this. Let's start off by iterating. We create a div that's going to iterate over the widgets. So so ng repeat repeat over all the widgets with widget in model.widgets. Okay, and the first part, they will all have this toolbar. Yes, all this toolbar. And plus, let's put here something just to render this. Let's put the JSON object, the actual JSON object, the widget. There we go. So if we render this, there they are. Here are all our widgets, right? There's how many in the service? If we go to the service. In the service, there are, not this one, the widget service. Where's the widget service? Where'd it go? Oh, there it is, widget service. How many are there? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's 7. So there should be 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 widgets, right? And each one with its own object. And the type, right? So let's try to do the, how about the image? Let's do the image. Right, so the image, what's going to happen here is that as we iterate, this will change, right, depending on the type. Okay, so what we could do is that we could define here, okay, as we iterate, we could define an ngswitch, like a switch case, right, that would have would be controlled by a variable, and depending on the variable, you would choose. There would be different cases that would be the evaluation depending on the on that variable. So let's look at ngswitch. So switch documentation, right? Is that you apply and you use the ngswitch directive. We'll see what a directive is, but this is what they are. These are directives. You give it the expression, right, on what is it that you want to switch on. In our case, we want to switch on the type. Right, we want to switch on the type, and then you give it different templates. And which template will render? It will render the template that matches, right, this ngswitch when this matches whatever the expression evaluates to. Make sense? So let's do that. Right. So let's do. What we'll do is that this ng repeat will also add ng switch, and we're going to switch on the widget dot type. Is that the name of it? Oh, it's widget type, not widget, not type. Widget type. Okay. All right, makes sense? All right. So within here, we can decide that if the ng switch when, right, if that's equal to heading, is it heading or header? Header, right? Then we want to render a heading, right? We want a heading and say, let's for now let's do all of them H1. Right, H1, and what do we want to render? Let's see. If it's a heading, we have text, right? So let's render the text, right? So we're going to render here the widget dot text. Okay, so let's render this again. So notice that that did not work. Wait, what? What did I do? Widget. I'm sorry? Oh, ng repeat. Oh, it's not within the context. Oh, right. We need to put this down below here. Div ngswitch. Take it out from here. Okay. And this will go down here, and we'll indent this a little bit. Okay. Is that what you meant? Yep. That still didn't work. Wait, let me see. What's going on here? Are they all being rendered right? This is empty. Header. Okay, maybe. Does this need this? Okay, there they are. Okay, I was putting this quote in here. So notice that only the ones that are heading are rendering, right? I think I have how many? I think there's 3 of them. If we go to the services, they are indeed, I believe there's 3. There's 1, 2, 3, right? And those 3 are rendering. Gizmodo, Lorem Ipsum, and that's it, right? None of the other ones are rendering. How about the image? Let's look at the image, right? The image could be div, right? If it's ngswitch, if it's image, then we want to load img, and this is source. The source, let's see, do we have an image here? And the source is, do we have a URL? Yes, we have a URL, right? So we can render the URL. So this would be, the source would be the URL. It would be widget.url, and we'll stop that. And the width, do we have a width? Do we have a width? I believe we have a width, don't we? Width, there we go. So we can, width could be widget.width. Okay? Right, so if we re-render, notice that indeed it's loading that image, right? But notice we got an error. Okay, if you look at the error, is that it's complaining that it's trying to fetch this something widget URL something or other, right? The reason is that this image, right, is being parsed by the browser, right, before JavaScript gets to it, before Angular gets a chance to fill in this value here, right? The browser reads this source, tries to interpret it, and says, what are these funny characters, right? Well, there must be an image that has this really weird name, okay? It tries to fetch it, it doesn't find it, and it fails, right? The controller, the browser fails it. Notice that eventually the image indeed has the correct URL. Right? That's because later on, when Angular gets a hold of this, says, let me put the correct URL there later. But by that time, the error has gone through. Yes? So a better approach is to use here what is called ngSource instead. So ngSource says, there is no source attribute, so I'm not giving it to you. So the browser has nothing to complain about. Right? There's nothing to load. The browser doesn't waste looking for an image that doesn't exist, right? So instead, it will be later on with Angular gets a hold of this image tag, right? It will feed in the src at a later time. Make sense? So if you reload this, notice that it works exactly the same way, but there is no error message. Make sense? Right? Why is this not scrolling? Oh, probably because, did I put an overflow hidden? Yeah, I did. Okay. We'll fix that a little later. All right, so we have that. What about that text, that H1? So this H1, we don't want this to be all H1, right? Ideally, a great thing that we could do, that you could do on the server side, but you can't do on the client side, unfortunately, is that this H1 could be, we could grab that from the size. Do you see the heading? We have the size here. See that too? right? You see that 4? It would be great if you could say h something widget dot size. Unfortunately, that won't work, right? The browser is going to try and parse this and have no idea what you're trying to say, right? This would work on the server side, right? If you would be doing this on the server side, you could calculate what these tags are because the browser hasn't had a chance to read this anyway, right? You could dynamically generate this using JSPs or PHP, right? And dynamically generate these headings. Instead, what we could do is yet again do something like do another switch here, another ng switch, right? Nested ng switches, right? That this is under widget.size, right? And then here you could have render this only if ng switch when is size is equal to 1, right? Or let's have a couple of these, or 2, or 3, or 4, or 4, or 5, and this could be 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, and one more, 6, right? If it's equal to 6, all right. So if we re-render this, notice that indeed Gizmodo is using H1, and this one is using H3. Yes. Yep. Say this again.
So widget.size.
Yep. Yep.
Does it treat widget.size as an observable object? So, for example, if something causes the size to change, does it calculate what?
It does.
It does.
Yes.
So then, from a
Please.
from a like a client side performance standpoint,
Right.
So if ngswitch seems like a little bit of a drag, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, if widget.size changes, right, you have observers listening to if that changes, which might be okay if that's what you want, right? Perhaps you can have on the right-hand side a slider, right, that as you manipulate, that this would change on the fly, right, if that's what you want.
But engine include also reacts.
Yes, right. Yep. Yeah, all these, what I'm going with this is that all of these could live in separate ng-include files. We haven't gotten there yet, but yes, these all would be in separate ng-switch files.
And then,
I wanted to show a different way of doing this in a minute, but go ahead.
so, and then if it is, I can ask that question later. If it is in a different file and you are doing an engine, you're still choosing what to include based on the engine switch. From a performance standpoint, would it be better to do that versus calculating like include?
So this is just a little bit more performance because you're not going fetching separate files separately for each one of these includes. Although they're only fetched once, right? So for instance, if you have 4 or 5 types of includes, as you iterate and you fetch the one for the YouTube, fetch one for the image, fetch one for the header, you only fetch it once, right? And then they're cached in the Angular.
So for example, the way that I implement it is I ng-include, and the thing that I include is calculated by a controller function, rather than ng-switch, where every switch is a different include pointing to a specific thing.
Okay. I don't know. I need to see it. Let's look at it after class, right? Let's take a look at it. There's an alternative implementation that would not use nested switches, right? So what we could do instead of using ng-switch, which works, what we could do is use something such as like ng-if, right? So ng-if, I showed you earlier ng-show, right? And notice that in both cases this would work. ng-show, this one in particular, if a widget that size is equal to 1, right? And I believe, is this okay, it is a number, right? Or show this other one, right, if this is equal to 2. Right, if this is equal to 2, right, or this is equal to 3, right, or this is equal to 4, this is equal to 5, and so on and so forth. Right, show one or another, right? So if we render it, notice that it still works, right? We have the just showing 3 and just showing 1. But notice if I go into the DOM, right? Notice that they're still there. They're all of them. They're all there. See that? H1 is there, H2 is there, H3 is there, 4, 5, 6. Right? If I go down further, right? Notice that if I look at this one, they're all there, right? 1 is there, 2, 3. Only this one's being shown, right? That's how ngshow works, right? They're all in the DOM, but all the other ones are being hidden, right? And it's only showing this one, okay? Because, I mean, they are in the DOM, aren't they, right? We're iterating them, and they're being copied verbatim there. So in this particular case, right, we might want to consider, instead of ngshow, we might want to consider using ngIf. So ngIf, what it does is that will have the same exact effect, but what it will do is that it will first pre-calculate, will pre-evaluate the expression, right? And if the expression is true, it will add that particular element to the DOM. If the expression is false, it won't even add it to the DOM, right? It will be removed from the DOM, right? So if we re-render, on the left-hand side, you get the same exact effect, right? You have H1, H2, H3, and whatnot, right? But if you look at each one of these, you'll notice that they're not even there, right? They have comments for the infrastructure to know that these have been removed. They're not even part of the DOM, right? They would have been part of the DOM, but they're not even there. Only H3 is there, right? So in this particular case, ngIf would be a better way to go, right? Also, as we'll see later on in directives, some embedded directives, or even in the ng includes, right? Some ng includes or directives might be dependent on scopes that are higher level, right? So that, but that have not yet been defined, right? So that when you include those files or when you include those directives, they might fail because the scope that they depend on has not yet been defined, right? So it's a good a typical solution is to use ngIf, right? So that first check to see if the expression is not undefined. If it's not undefined, then, right, as the body of the ngIf, load or include or render what's inside of the ngIf. Don't add it to the DOM unless the outer expression is true or it's not falsy, right? If it's truthy, okay? So ngIf, you can definitely do everything that you can do with ngshow, you can do with ngIf, but not vice versa. So yeah, so those were two alternatives, right? Nested ng switches or use ngIf. Okay. All right. So let's go a little further. And for now, I'm just going to comment out this body overflow hidden because it's not letting me scroll. We can deal with that a little later. Yeah, so let's keep going. So let's look at something a little more challenging. How about this YouTube video, right? So this YouTube video, let's implement that. So if it's YouTube, so div ngswitch, when if it's equal to YouTube, is that the name? Correct? YouTube, yes. What we need to do here is that we want to do this iframe over here. See, there's this iframe down here. We want to render this iframe, right? Dynamically though, right? Right now this would be hard coded, right? It would be hard-coded. So we don't want to do it this way. We want this to be dynamic, just like this source here. This source here is dynamic. We want this source also to be dynamic. Yes, all right. So we could do ng source, right? Ng source, and I think we have the source, don't we? Let's see, where is it? YouTube. There's the source, right? HTTPS and YouTube, so and so forth, right? This URL right there. So let's copy that. Let's verify that that URL is actually correct. It is. It's my next boat. So this is. I would like to embed this boat in there, right? So we could just have this dynamically generated there, right? So I have my ng source just like I have for my image. And we could say something like widget.url, right? And when we render, notice that we get an error in the console, right? And it's complaining something about that link, right? That it's trying to interpolate that URL, blah 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 blah, right? And what's happening here is that dynamic content that is embedded like this, right? Like that video, is by default interpreted as dangerous iframes, right? Or dangerous, because an iframe is embedding somebody else's a website, right? That might include all sorts of things, right? It might include mischievous JavaScript that we are embedding in our place, right? So the default policy is to be distrustful of any URL that you are bringing through an iframe. Okay, I am going to distrust anything that is there. I am going to trust images. Images, presumably, you can embed any source in there, right? They are static, right? So they're not mischievous. But iframes are not, right? You can embed an entire set of mischievous content in there. So by default, ng source says no. I'm not going to trust that content. Okay. So what we need to do is to use another technique, which is going to allow us to embed this. And I believe, do I have that? Examples of that. Why is this not rendering? AngularJS. I guess I don't. Do I have SCE here? I don't. Okay, I'm going to add some examples of SCE there. So SCE, Angular, SCE, no, SCE, allows you to embed various contents, such as, or provide a criteria by which you vote whether you trust certain content or not, right? So that it's strict contextual escaping, meaning, do you want me to interpret this content, right? And can I pass it to you, and you, based on some policy defined by you, right? Or maybe based on some blacklisting or some whitelisting, and you can say, okay, I'll accept URLs that come from a particular source, but not others, right? I can say maybe all content that comes from YouTube, I deem trustworthy, or any HTML that somebody copies and pastes here. I want to look at it, right? Perhaps before I dynamically render this, right? So that you have a chance to vote whether you trust this or not programmatically, right? So SCE is an API that allows you to vote certain things to be deemed trustworthy or not, right? So we're going to have the image instead of us loading the URL this way, we're going to pass this URL to a controller. The controller is going to run some logic and run this policy and say, do you trust this, right? And if the controller trusts this, it's going to return a trustworthy content. It says, yes, I trust it. and then the ng source says, okay, now I'm going to load this. All right. So let's go to the controller. I'm going to say model. Do you trust? Right, and we're going to pass the widget.url. Okay, and the URL and the controller will be responsible to vetting this content. Right, so let's implement this do you trust on the controller. So let's go to the controller for this, and the controller is widget list controller. There it is. We'll declare the function right here. Do you trust? Actually, do you trust? There's several things that you can trust, right? Do you trust this URL? Do you trust this HTML content, right? That we want to embed. So let's make it a little more explicit. Do you trust URL? Right. Let's name that. Do you trust URL? And in here, we can implement it in a function of the same name, right? Implement it a little further. So this do you trust URL is going to receive the URL in question, okay? And what we want to do is use SCE, right, to vote whether we trust this or not, right? So let's use here trust URL. I think it's called trust. What is it? Let me see down here. Trust self script. What's it called? SCE is enable parse trust as. There it is. Trust as HTML. Trust as URL. So we can vote, right? We can vote whether we trust that URL. So we can say something like SCE dot trust as URL, and we can pass it the URL. So we're going to deem this URL to be trustworthy, and we're going to return we trust it. We are voting. Obviously, we're not setting up any policy here. Probably we want to parse it to see if it's in a particular domain, right? If the ID is a particular ID that we know of, that's in our database, and that somebody has, it's not containing any obscene content, right? That has been. But right now, we're just going to blindly trust it, right? And we're just going to return yes.
Are there things that are categorically prohibited if you're using AngularJS?
No, everything is untrusted, right? The default is that I'm not going to trust anything, right? And that you have to explicitly vote whether you trust this or not.
Are there things that you're not able to vote as being trustworthy?
No.
Okay.
You can trust anything.
Okay. I see.
Yes. No, remember that somebody created this content, right? So presumably whoever created this content already trusts this content, right? So somebody has. I'm sorry?
The person who is visiting the content.
So remember, we're working on the part where we are consuming the content, right? So somebody presumably dragged this widget there, went to the URL, right? Looked at it, copied the URL, and then generated the widget. So presumably somebody has gone through the process of trusting this URL, and it's in the database as a trustworthy content. And just like when you're creating when you go to YouTube or you're going to anywhere, right? The content that are there, you are explicitly voting that you trust that content because you're voting. You're going to that website, right, and you're navigating, and after a while you trust it. Yes.
What's the difference between trust as URL?
Trust. Oh, right.
Why does that work? I don't know.
I think this is a broader that is like JSON objects that you want to or text or ASCII files that I'm not quite sure. Yeah, let me take a look at that. Okay, there's also trust as JavaScript, right? If you want to embed JavaScript. So we go back. Still, wait a minute. Can't. SCE is not defined. Oh, we never loaded $ SCE. So let's load that service here. We're still not a model. Can't interpolate yada yada. Blocked loading from URL. Not insecure. What am I missing here? Trust URL. Trust as URL. Oh, let me try using yours. Trust, which resource?
Yeah.
Oop, not that one. Let's load. Okay, that loaded. Same origin. Okay, so that's something else. All right, so notice that it is loading the iframe. Okay. Let me quickly. Oh, it's not loading the iframe. YouTube, an iframe, because. Oh, you know why? Okay, because okay, so YouTube wants us to use a separate. Right. So if I go to that URL, where is it? Where is it? In the service. Right. If I go to that URL, where are you? This one right here. If I go to that URL, actually, YouTube, when you want to embed it, when you want to share and you want to embed it, this is what they want you to use. See that? The actual URL needs to be this format. See that? It's the same exact URL. I'm sorry, it's the same exact ID at the end, but the URL is slightly different. See that? Right. So let's build that from the controller. Right. So this is a var base URL. It'll be something like that. We just need the ID at the end, right? And where is the ID? Is at the end of this URL, right? So we can split this var URL parts. You can say URL split on a slash. Right, split it on the slash. This will give me an array of strings, and the ID will be the very last element of that array. Last element, that's going to be URL parts dot length -1. Right, now I have the ID, and I can just append it to URL parts. I can append it with the ID. All right, so let's try that. What? Base URL. Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. Base URL, and I can retrieve that. Let's try that. No, not that. I really want that photo. Okay, there it is. All right, the URL was embedded. All right, I think I'm gonna leave it here. Let me add the code for embedding HTML, raw HTML, which uses the same technique, but instead of saying trust URL, it's trust HTML, right? Also, it needs an additional directive there, ngbind. So I'll add that and I'll post it later tomorrow morning. All right.